Laura Weston, 29, auburn hair swept up in a soft bridal updo, freckled complexion, dark eyes that carried both warmth and a particular watchfulness, the kind that develops in people who have learned, early and well, to notice things before things notice them. A middle school art teacher from Asheville, North Carolina, marrying the man she had loved for 4 years on a Saturday in May. She was not a dramatic person. She was not looking for conflict on her wedding day, but she was, as the afternoon would reveal, exactly the kind of person who sees clearly under pressure and who responds to a difficult thing with the one tool that never fails, her wits. Thomas Weston, 31, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, the kind of man who laughs easily and means it. A landscape architect with a kind face and a genuine heart and one significant blind spot, which is the thing that happens to many good people raised in complicated families. He loved his mother. He had always loved his mother, and he had spent 31 years finding ways to make that love compatible with the truth of who she was, which is a form of labor that good children perform, quietly for their whole lives without anyone quite naming it. Diane Weston, 57, Thomas's mother, a woman of considerable social presentation, the right clothes, the right manner, the practiced warmth of someone who has learned that likability is a tool. She had not approved of Laura from the beginning, not loudly, never loudly, but in the way of a woman who specializes in the indirect, the carefully placed comment, the meaningful silence, the smile that doesn't reach the thing behind it. There are days that ask everything of you, not in the way of crisis, though crisis can come, but in the quieter way of being asked to hold too many things at once. Joy and watchfulness, love and clarity, the desire to simply be present, and the knowledge that presence today requires paying attention. Laura Weston had known, going into her wedding day, that it would be one of those days. She had not known exactly how. The ceremony was at 4, a small garden wedding, 37 guests, white chairs on the lawn, a trellis covered in peonies that Laura had chosen because her grandmother had grown them, and the smell of them was, to her, the smell of Sunday mornings in a house where she had always felt safe. The sky was the particular blue of a May afternoon that has decided to cooperate fully. Thomas cried when she came down the aisle. Not dramatically, just the way men cry when they are surprised by the depth of what they feel and haven't managed to prepare for it adequately. She loved him for it. She had known for 4 years that this was the man she was going to build her life with. And she was right, and she knew she was right. And it was one of the most uncomplicated feelings she had ever had. They said their vows. The officiant, a college friend of Thomas's, who had become ordained for exactly this purpose, was warm and slightly funny in the right places. The guests laughed at the right moments. Laura's mother, seated in the front row beside Laura's father, wept steadily from approximately the 3rd sentence of the ceremony and showed no signs of stopping, which was entirely consistent with everything's Laura knew about her mother and which she found deeply comforting. Diane Weston sat in the 2nd row, composed, appropriate, smiling at the right moments, her hands folded in her lap. Laura noticed, not because she was looking for it, but because she was the kind of person who noticed that Diane's smile did not change when the officiant said the word partnership. It simply held its position, like a photograph of a smile rather than the thing itself. She filed it. She had been filing Diane for 4 years. She was a thorough filer. The reception was in the garden adjoining the ceremony space. White linen tables, candles just lit in the early evening. The caterers moving with the practiced grace of people who do this every weekend and are, nonetheless, genuinely good at it. Laura circulated the way brides do, slowly, warmly. The long orbit of a wedding reception, where every table has someone you love and every conversation wants to run just a little longer than you can give it. She stopped at her grandmother's table and held her grandmother's hands for a long moment because her grandmother was 81, and this was the kind of moment you anchor properly. She stopped at the table of her art students and parents, 2 couples who had become friends, and who had not expected to be moved by a wedding but clearly were. She stopped at Thomas's college friends' table and laughed at a story she had already heard twice and which was still funny. She was crossing the garden toward the head table when she saw it. She was perhaps 15 feet away. Moving between tables, glass in hand, Diane was standing near the head table, standing near Laura's glass, to be precise, which was set apart from Thomas's by the small floral marker the caterers had placed. Laura slowed. Diane's back was half turned. Her right hand was at the glass for a moment, a brief, practiced motion, the kind that would have been invisible to anyone not at the right angle. And the right distance with the right quality of attention. Laura stopped walking. She stood still for a moment. The garden moved around her, laughter, music, the clink of glasses, all of it continuing as though nothing had happened. Because for everyone else in the garden, nothing had. She breathed. She did not panic. She was not a panic person. She was a person who, when something difficult landed, went very still inside and began to think. She thought about what she had seen. She thought about what she had not seen. She had not seen clearly what the motion was, what it contained, whether her reading of it was correct. She was not willing to act on certainty she didn't have. She also was not willing to dismiss what she had seen. She crossed the garden. She reached the head table. She looked at her glass, looked at Thomas's glass. She set her hand on the table beside Thomas's glass and looked, as casually as she could arrange her expression, at the surface of her own. Something was slightly different about the way the champagne caught the light, or perhaps she was seeing what she expected to see. She could not be certain. She picked up Thomas's glass, set it where hers had been, moved hers to where his had been. A quiet, unhurried exchange, done with the relaxed ease of a woman, adjusting the placement of things at her own table, which is not remarkable. She stood up straight. She smiled at the couple at the nearest table who had just caught her eye. Then she waited. Diane came to the head table 10 minutes later, which was when the caterer was beginning to signal that the toasts were about to begin. She was carrying her own glass. She looked at the table. Her eyes moved briefly across the two glasses. Something flickered, very fast, very controlled, and then it was gone. She looked at Laura. Laura looked back at her with the open, warm expression of a bride on her wedding day. "Time for toasts," Diane said. "I can't wait," Laura said. And she meant it in ways Diane did not entirely understand. Diane's toast was first. She had insisted on this. Thomas had mentioned it. With the slight, rueful patience of a man who has learned to let certain things go to save his energy for the ones that matter. She held her remarks, which were typed on a note card she held with practiced confidence. The toast began warmly. Diane spoke about Thomas's childhood. A good speaker, genuinely, with the rhythm of someone who understands how a room works. She said gracious things about the wedding. She said appropriate things about marriage. Then she said, "And Laura, I want to welcome you to this family. A family that has always valued its traditions and its integrity." A pause that carried more weight than the word alone. "I look forward to learning what kind of wife and mother you will be." There was a ripple through the room, the particular ripple of people who are not sure if what they just heard means what it might mean. Thomas, beside Laura, went slightly still. Laura smiled. The open, warm smile of a woman who is entirely comfortable in this moment, which was the most useful thing she could do. "That is so kind," she said directly, graciously, into the pause. "I look forward to that too." Diane lifted her glass. The room lifted theirs. Diane drank. And then, nothing dramatic. That was the first thing. That was the thing that told Laura what she needed to know. Diane set her glass down. The color in her face changed, very slightly, in the way of someone managing an unexpected internal event. Her smile held. Her composure held. She was a very composed woman, Diane Weston. Laura gave her that. But she set the glass down with the specific care of someone who wanted to set it somewhere. She would not be reaching for it again. And she moved, a few minutes later, with a murmured excuse toward the far end of the garden. Laura watched her go. She turned to Thomas, who was looking at his mother's retreating figure with a slight furrow between his eyes. "Is she all right?" he said. "I think she just needs some air," Laura said, which was, as far as she was aware, perfectly accurate. She told Thomas that night, in the quiet of the hotel room, in the particular settling that follows a day that has asked everything of you and been survived. She told him clearly and fully and without anger, because she had had the whole of the reception to process it and had arrived, somewhere around the third course, at the place past anger where things become simply facts to be dealt with. He listened the way Thomas listened to the things that mattered, completely, without interruption, his eyes not leaving her face. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You switched the glasses," he said. "I switched the glasses." And she drank from hers. She drank from hers. He looked at the ceiling. Then he looked at his hands. Then he looked at Laura with an expression that contained a great deal. Grief and love and the particular complicated sadness of someone who has known, somewhere beneath the surface, a truth about a person they love. and has just had it arrive in the room with its coat on. I'm sorry, he said. It came from very deep in him. I know, she said. I know you are. She took his hand. Not to comfort exactly. They were past the stage where this could be comforted, but to be present with him in it, which is different and more honest and more useful. What was it? He said. I don't know, she said. Something she thought would help her get what she wanted on a day when she understood she was losing something. She paused. I didn't drink it. That's what I know. He was quiet again. We have to talk to her, he said. We do, she agreed. Not tonight. No, he said. Not tonight. They sat in the quiet for a while. Outside the hotel window, the city moved in its ordinary Saturday night way, indifferent and continuous. You're remarkable, Thomas said finally. I'm practical, she said. There's a difference. He almost smiled. There really isn't. The conversation with Diane happened the following Thursday. Laura had thought about how she wanted to approach it for 4 days. She had talked to her mother once, not for advice exactly, but for the grounding that a mother provides when the world has gone strange. Her mother had listened and said, with the specific wisdom of a woman who has lived 62 years, approach it for Thomas's sake, and for yours, not for hers. I know, Laura had said, but also, her mother had added, after a pause, don't let her entirely off the hook. I know that too, Laura had said. They met at a coffee shop. Neutral ground. Laura had chosen it. Diane arrived precisely on time, which was its own kind of message. She was composed. She was wearing the composed face. Laura ordered tea. She let the tea arrive. She looked across the table at this woman who was now, by law and love and the particular permanence of a Saturday in May, part of her life. She said, I want to have an honest conversation. Not an argument. A conversation. Diane said nothing, which was an answer. I saw what you did at the head table, Laura said. I want you to know that. I also want you to know that I'm not going to describe it to Thomas's father, or to your friends, or to anyone who was there that day. A pause. I'm telling you this not as a threat or as a promise. I'm telling you because I want you to understand who you are dealing with. Diane's composed face did the thing where it held its position. I also want you to understand something else, Laura said. Her voice was steady. Not cold, steady. I love your son. That is not going to change. My being in his life does not take him from you. I am not your enemy. She set her hands flat on the table. But I am not a person who will be managed, or handled, or gotten around. A pause. What you tried to do, whatever it was, whatever you told yourself it was, it came from fear. I understand fear. I am not going to pretend I don't understand it. Diane's composure shifted, very slightly. The way very controlled things shift when a seam finds the right pressure. I'm asking you, Laura said, to give us a chance. A real one. Not the performance of a chance. A real one. She picked up her tea. I am not easy to love quickly. Neither are you, from what I can see. That might actually be something we have in common. The coffee shop moved around them, the ordinary sounds of a Thursday morning. Diane looked at the table, then at Laura, then at the table again. I don't know how to do this, she said finally. It came from somewhere that was not the composed face. It came from somewhere older and smaller and more honest. No, Laura said. I don't think you do. I think that's true. She set her cup down. I think we can figure it out, slowly, if you are willing to actually try. Diane was quiet for a long moment. I behaved very badly, she said. It was not an elaborate apology. It was not a full accounting. It was, Laura understood, more than Diane Weston had said honestly to another person in a very long time. Yes, Laura said. You did. She did not fill the silence with absolution she didn't yet have. She did not perform forgiveness that hadn't been earned. But she stayed at the table. She finished her tea. She ordered a second. Diane ordered one too. They sat for another 40 minutes. They talked about Thomas, the safe territory, and then, gradually, about other things. Small things, real ones. It was not a resolution. It was a beginning. Beginnings. Laura had learned from 29 years of living and one very long Saturday in May are the best you can usually ask for. The years did not make it simple. They rarely do with complicated people, but Diane tried, imperfectly and sometimes with the effortful quality of someone practicing a skill. They are not naturally gifted in, but she tried. There were Thanksgivings that were better than expected. There were moments in the kitchen of Thomas and Laura's house, 2 Christmases later, when Diane looked at Laura across a counter covered in flour and said something self-deprecating that was actually funny. And they both laughed, and it was real. Thomas watched these moments with the particular relief of a man who loves two people, who are learning, slowly and with difficulty, to also love each other. He never entirely knew the full shape of what had happened at the reception. Laura had told him enough. She had kept the rest in the quiet place where people keep things that are resolved, rather than relitigated, because some things, once addressed, do not need to be carried forward as weapons. Her grandmother, who she called every Sunday, asked once how things were going with Thomas's mother. Better, Laura said. Better is good, her grandmother said. Better is usually where it starts. How long does it take? Laura asked. Her grandmother was quiet for a moment. Depends on how willing everyone is to keep showing up, she said. But if everyone keeps showing up, it tends to get there eventually. Laura looked out the window of her kitchen at the garden she and Thomas had planted in the spring. Peonies along the back fence, just starting to bloom. I think we're getting there, she said, and she meant it. Perhaps this is what the complicated loves teach us. Not the easy ones, the ones that arrive smooth and stay smooth, but the ones that require something of us. The ones with difficult people in them, orbiting the center of what we love, asking us to be clearer and steadier and more patient than we thought we had capacity to be. They teach us that the opposite of conflict is not peace exactly. Sometimes the opposite of conflict is honesty, the kind that costs something, that sits across a table and says, I saw what you did, and I am still here, and I'm asking you to try. They teach us that composure is not the same as coldness, that watching carefully is not the same as suspicion, that switching two glasses at a head table is not a victory. It is just a woman protecting herself quietly and doing it with enough presence of mind to also leave room for something better. And they teach us that family, real family, the kind you build and tend and repair, when it breaks, is not a thing that arrives complete on a May Saturday in a garden full of peonies. It is something you choose, again and again, with imperfect people, on ordinary Thursdays, over tea, and that the choosing, done with honesty and patience and the willingness to keep showing up, is the whole of it, is more than enough